I'm going to turn it over to Abby Bassett, Senior Director of Operational Excellence from McLean Fogg, to discuss their company's proactive approach to COVID-19 operational and safety protocols. The partnership sincerely thanks McLean Fogg for sharing its approach and its expertise, and to Abby for making time in a very busy schedule. You will see there's a Q&A button on the bottom of your screen, which will allow you to type in questions throughout the presentation. Once Abby is complete, we will go through as many of those questions as time allows. You'll also see that as you're seeing other people's questions, if you see your question already asked, you can upvote it, and that way we can see questions that are really leading the queue. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Abby.
All right, well, good morning, everybody, and thank you, Seth, and the Buffalo Niagara Partnership for giving me this opportunity, and for giving McLean Fogg this opportunity to share some of our company best practices. So to get us started, if you go to the next slide, I'd like to introduce McLean Fogg Company and just give you guys some perspective on who we are first before we get started. So our company started back in 1925. We are a privately held, family-owned business based out of the Chicago area. We have between 3,200 and 3,500 employees to date. Across two businesses, half of our businesses is dedicated to the automotive industry, providing fasteners, as well as the other half of our business is dedicated to providing fasteners for the power distribution businesses, so keeping your electricity on in the case of storms and things like that. We're split up between 26 facilities across the world. Go to next slide. Go. So for our company, our values, core values for the business are integrity, really focused on people, keeping people safe, of course, as you will see in our presentation today, but also supporting them through education and through other resources. Our focus, of course, is on our customers. Of course, we want to provide our customers with the best products, best quality products at the right time in the right quantities. And then you can see stewardship as well as one of our core values. For operational excellence, so that can mean a lot of different things across industry. So I wanted to make sure you guys understood for us, this is what it means. So for us, our operational transformation, this is our lean manufacturing focus. We also include environmental health and safety with our mission of zero as part of our operational excellence. We also include quality, so focusing on, again, the quality that our people bring to the business as they create parts and have pride in that work that they do, as well as, again, kind of one of our key pieces to our business, which is innovation. So when we have a problem, we try to focus on how might we come up with a solution to that problem. And so you can go to the next slide. So this is just our global footprint, and you may be curious, how did McLean Fogg, get to the Buffalo area? So back in 2014, we actually acquired Curtis Screw Company, which brought Paul Honacki as a leader into our business, and he is actually a member of the Buffalo Niagara Partnership. And next slide. Some of the products that we offer on our automotive side of the business, you can see fasteners, engineered components, and different plastic solutions. So we have different operations such as cold and warm forming, hot forging, and plastic molding injection. And on our power component slide, you can see the different businesses, network solutions, insulators, and hardware solutions. So typically the way we describe this is, look at a telephone pole, and it's anything that you see up above on that telephone pole, bringing the power to your businesses as well as to your homes and to your families. And also just wanted to share some of our customers. To give you an idea of, obviously we may share some of the same customers, but to kind of show on the different sides of the business who our customers are and who our channel partners are. All right, and so with that, so again, my name is Abby Bassett. I am the Senior Director of Operational Excellence for McLean Fogg as a company. I have been with McLean Fogg now for about 6 years. Most of my career has been focused on environmental health and safety, And I've worked in past organizations in the aluminum, primary aluminum industry, aerospace fasteners, as well as in food and beverage. So that's been kind of my career experience. And if you noticed from my picture there, during this time of shelter in place, I've let my hair grow out a little bit. So you'll see, if you can see the video, you'll see a slight difference in appearance today. All right, so let's get started into kind of the core focus of our presentation today, which is our operational protocols. So to give you a quick kind of navigation of this operational protocol, as you can see, McLean Fogg as a business, we are all about, again, people and health and safety. So we are actually sharing this protocol. So if at any time you're interested in accessing this, you can see the link here is shared to you. It is an external link, so anyone can access this. Once you get into the document, it is set up with an overview, so you can kind of click through within the document, as well as you can click through external resources. So we have different templates that you can pull up, some of which I will show in the presentation today, as well as some functionality throughout the document that you can kind of return to home, which will bring you back to this overview slide. So we tried to set it up to be very simple, very easy and straightforward for anyone to use. All right, so one of the first key pieces to our operational protocol is establishing a crisis management team. And I wanted to make sure we included a bunch of pictures of people as part of this crisis management team. While these individuals might not necessarily be part of that crisis management team, they are the reason that we are coming together. It is through our support of our people, through their health and safety, that we're able to accomplish much in our organization. So I did want to bring that back. So we wanted to kind of show you, this is the reason why McLean Fogg is really so focused on crisis management through this pandemic, as well as just in general our health and safety of our employees. So as part of that crisis management team, of course, we want to have the general manager kind of continue their leadership, but also to very specifically define some roles as part of that crisis management team, so that we have someone who is dealing with access control, with isolation, when we do have somebody who maybe is experiencing symptoms in the workplace, someone who is focused on doing sanitation and disinfection. This is very different than our normal, cleaning protocols that we've done in the past, as well as somebody who is focused on communications and training of employees as they come back to work, of course, and approach this new normal that we are all experiencing. What are these new processes? What does it look like? Any training, any communication that we can give our employees up front is going to be very helpful to them as they return. And then, of course, personal protective equipment, and making sure that not only are we selecting good personal protective equipment for our employees, but also sourcing it. That's been, of course, a big challenge for us at McLean Fogg, and I'm sure a big challenge for you and all of your companies. The other thing that as you go through kind of our protocol, you'll see this red checkbox. And so we wanted to make sure that those critical items for restarting our operations are very much highlighted as must-dos and critical items for our business. So let's get into cleaning and disinfection. There we go. So our first task is to review and understand, prepare for, all of these different processes that we're going to be going into specific to deep cleaning and disinfection. So general cleaning, meaning, these are the things that you're going to be doing every day as part of keeping your facilities properly sanitized for your employees. So think about cafeterias, think about those high touch areas, and understanding, how often do we need to be cleaning them? What types of material should we be using, what types of chemicals we should be using to ensure that we are doing our daily cleaning and increasing that frequency. As well as deep cleaning, if you think about having that chance of somebody who does have COVID-19 or again is just experiencing symptoms in your workplace, how do you respond to that? So within this disinfection and deep cleaning protocol, you'll find best practices shared for both of those processes. And so as you get those processes in place, we also wanted to make sure that we're kind of checking and making sure that we are holding ourselves accountable to those new processes. So we produced and implemented a layered process audit. This can be done in the form of a T-card, which you see on the screen here, or of course, if you have an electronic type of audit process, you could build that into your electronic process. But the idea is that whatever you normally use, make this part of your normal process for auditing, because again, this is really the new normal. And we, honestly, we don't know the end. We don't know what that end point is going to be for this new normal and new frequency of cleaning and disinfection. And then again, thinking about isolation. So when you do have somebody who happens to have the symptoms come up within your facility, what is your process? How do you how do you quickly move that person into a location that is safe and protect others? So we want to make sure that as we're going through, again, we have that kind of point person, if you will, that is a coordinator. So, in the past, you may have heard, for other types of response like this, a coordinator being assigned to be the point person, to train others on what to do, to train your supervisors, as an example of how do they respond, what are those symptoms of COVID-19. While it is widely communicated across the world now what those symptoms are, there may be some people that don't know or don't understand, what is a fever? What does that mean? What is tightness in the chest? When should I react? So as part of that training, as part of this isolation coordination, first and foremost, make sure your people who are those frontline leaders understand what the symptoms are. And then once they have identified a potential risk to your employees, what do they do with them? Do you have a space within your facility where you can move that individual who is at risk? Do you have PPE that you can give them to cover the face and prevent the risk of transmission to someone else? And then another thing to think about as you're going through this process is, how do you document? How do you document what types of forms do you want to have present and readily available for the coordinator or for anyone else who may be participating in the isolation process? So one of the best practices that we came up with internally to kind of support this was from our York, North Carolina facility. And so they put together this rapid response procedure showing, from a frontline leadership and operations standpoint, here is the flow chart of what you would do. Here's, human resources reaction to, identifying that person that needs to be isolated. And then for the local crisis management team, here's your, your flow chart for communication and reaction as well. One of the things that as McLean Fogg that we have found has been very, very useful to us during this process of having some people off-site, working off-site, or unfortunately in some cases furloughed, we have used some media called alerts media that allows you to send out emails, do phone calls, do text messages, all from one kind of standard centralized source. So you can quickly communicate with employees whether they're on-site or off-site, as an example. And then daily self-screening. So this is very simple. You don't need much at all from a resources standpoint to be able to do this. But this is just education and communication of, asking individual employees to do a daily self-screening. Do you have a fever? Do you have the ability to take your temperature at home? If you do, please monitor yourself. And also just think about, how are you feeling on a day-to-day basis? And if you're sick, stay home, very, very simply and straightforward. So you may want to, again, provide some communication on how to do that, at what frequency to do that for your employees, so that when they do become, in a situation where they have symptoms and that they are feeling well, they know, number one, it's okay to stay home. In fact, in this case, we are asking you to please stay home so that you don't, again, expose your fellow workforce potentially to the COVID-19 disease. And then as people come into our facilities, we have set up temperature screening. So I included a lot of pictures here because it's one thing, for you to write a document that describes, how to do temperature screening. how to corral people, how to, keep social distancing as you're going through this process of temperature screening. But it is a completely different process when you want to practically put this in place. So I thought it'd be helpful for you all to kind of see these pictures to show, this is really what we're talking about when we say temperature screening. It's not a simple line. It's not as simple as having a nurse available. It is a whole lot more to that process. So you can see all of the things we've done, all the signage, the corrals with arrows within that kind of 6-foot social distancing distance, so people can visually see where they should be standing or how far they should be standing from each other. You can see some folks wearing, of course, masks and PPE as they're greeting our employees as they come in. And you can also see some somewhat makeshift plexiglass barriers, if you will, to again provide that layer of protection for the person who will be doing temperature screening and speaking with individuals as they're coming in to see how they're feeling for the day. So there's several tasks built into temperature screening. Again, really just understanding what that process looks like for your facility. Do you have anything available to you where you can set up something similar? What is that entry point? It's much easier, of course, to have a single entry point in the situation than multiple entry points, so that you can kind of reduce the traffic and really have it kind of standardized. Do you have touchless thermometers? This is a material or a piece of equipment for us that was difficult to find. Thankfully, now we do have those available to our operations. Do you want to develop, instead of a walkthrough, do you want to develop a drive-through situation? So some of our locations have even set up a drive-through so that the employee stays within their vehicle as they're waiting to go through the temperature testing and kind of screening process. With our nurse or volunteer temperature takers set up in kind of a booth outside in the parking lot. So again, just many, many things to consider as you're going through this from a logistics standpoint. So for us, what the temperature screening steps look like, and you can see the equipment that we have got for use. So waiting in line. So again, making sure again that the 6 feet of distance for social distancing purposes is maintained. The last thing you want to do is just corral everybody together in a big group, and then again increase their exposure risk by putting them too close together. As you're going through temperature taking, making sure that you're using that non-contact method, and then where you do end up with maybe a high reading or an abnormal reading. Sometimes we have gotten low readings as people are coming in from cold weather or traveling to work with the windows of their vehicle down. Their skin becomes cool, and therefore your non-contact method becomes a little bit more difficult to utilize. Having an option where they can sit in a safe space, sit in a warm environment, rescreen them to see if you can get a more accurate reading, or if you do have healthcare professionals on site. Many facilities have nurses, many don't, but if you do have that ability to have that nurse, can they provide a contact method for ensuring what that temperature is? Keeping your line moving, developing a screening log so that anyone you do send home, you have a quick way of noting that, so you can communicate that information to human resources, for follow-up and for purposes of logging. And then making sure that human resources is in the loop on anybody that we send home, so that we can do what we are calling kind of a care call, again to just reach out to the employee and ask how things are going, make sure that they have reached out to their healthcare professional, and that they're getting the support that they need. For employees who are out, so we kind of established a 24 hours or more rule, if you will. So if we have an employee outside of their normal schedule, if they're out of the office for more than 24 hours, our visitors and our contractors, we have a separate screening process for them. To kind of highlight the added risk that if someone is out for vacation, maybe they are traveling, maybe they're having family events, going to different cities. We found a variety of things in our experience that people will still do, even though shelter in place and stay home executive orders are in place. People will still go out and live their lives. So we have a separate screening process for that. So just to kind of highlight that process, all it is a form. So we ask some additional questions. And I'll tell you, this form is, I think, on its third or fourth version, because we started out with, hey, have you traveled outside of the US? And then as the pandemic, or as it really, COVID-19 became a pandemic and it began to spread into the United States, that question kind of became moot. So we started zeroing in on different things as the pandemic has progressed. So now we're to the point where we're talking about not travel outside of the country, but travel outside of your county of where you work and live. And so we're asking these questions again to really understand what is the risk of that individual entering, whether it's our employee coming back from, again, a leave, or it's a visitor or a contractor that's really critical for our business. For the most part, you know, as many others are probably experiencing, we're not really inviting anyone into our facilities for sales calls or for non-critical visits. But even in the case where we do have a critical visit, we want to ask these questions to make sure we understand what that person's risk could be. And then for our employees, we're going into a little bit deeper of a discussion around symptoms. All right, so for plant opening and ramp up, we have several, really several checklists, several different resources that we have pulled together to help our operations kind of reopen. In many cases, we have had limited operations, not full shutdowns. In some cases, we have had, unfortunately, some full shutdowns on the automotive side of our business. And then on the power side of our business, we have been up and running and filling storm orders. So filling, again, those critical orders for locations that have had, you know, tornado damage and things like that. So we really have a mixed bag, but our focus has been on plant opening and ramp up, really with that focus on what is this new normal and how are we achieving the new normal. So we've asked for really 3 different stages to prepare, take some action, and to, again, kind of monitor and kind of self-audit and check ourselves. So within our package for preparation, we have a bunch of different checklists, some of which are very focused on environmental health and safety, and others that are very focused on just operations in general and facilities, kind of general facilities management. Critical equipment is a difficult one, hard to do, you know, a standard across the board for us for critical equipment, but many of our facilities have developed that. As an example, you know, if you had to shut down something like an aluminum foundry, you know, what would that look like? And then how do you get it back up and running? It's a little bit different than on our automotive side, where we have cold formers or, you know, CNC screw machines, that kind of thing. So we're asking also, of course, that our sites come up with what that critical startup and shutdown looks like. You know, and then of course, supply chain, how are we interacting with our customers? How are we interacting with our suppliers? What information are we getting? What are we able to share? I'm sure that's been a frustration or point of frustration for all of us, but I think at this point, you know, we're all doing the best that we can to share information and share what our plans are. For action, again, it's really focused on communication, training, how do we get production back up and running, and then for monitoring, again, that audit and review process, and how are we impacting, or what's going on in the community, and within the industry, if you will. So we're not just monitoring, you know, our internal actions, but we're also monitoring external actions to see if we can, you know, share from those best practices, just as we're doing today. So in the preparation phase, as you can see, we have just a quick checklist, again, with an EHS ramp-up checklist, with the expectation that these are kind of the couple of things that we find most critical for us to go through and prepare. So just kind of nodding back to, you know, that cleaning and sanitation process. What does it look like? Do we have the materials needed? Do we have, you know, the process for starting work, for training people and communicating these new normals with social distancing and temperature screening? Do we have that crisis management team set up? and have they approved, all of these different protocols for their facility and what it looks like in their facility so that they can safely return to work. Within the action phase, again, assessing material availability has been ongoing and something that we want to continue to do, I would say, for at least the next 3 months, and understanding, again, what is that new normal, what is that new supply chain, and we found some of our vendors who we normally use cannot supply, so we've had to go out and find other resources for things like disposable masks, for N95s, for gloves, you name it. We've had to go and just look anywhere and everywhere to find these materials. Establishing, our plan for employee training. So as people come back into the business, what does that look like? Do you have the chance to get ahead of it? Or do you have to wait till that first day back? And then our revised communication plan. I think one thing that we're finding is the more communication, the better. So what does that plan look like, and how frequently should we be talking to our employees about this ever-changing situation? And then for monitoring, again, just understanding what are our minimum requirements. So that's one reason why we wanted to establish this protocol for our business. Is this is the expectation across the business. And by the way, here's the resources, right, to be able to do this. We wanted to make sure that from a PPE perspective and from a social distancing perspective that we are auditing that process. And not just auditing in the sense of, fill out a checklist, yes, people are wearing their PPE, but going and talking to the operators, checking in with them to make sure that they're comfortable. With PPE in particular, the cloth face coverings that are reusable and washable, that many of you are wearing out in your community, as well as having that expectation to have your operators wear them as they come into work. They are not very comfortable to wear, especially in situations where it is hot. So understanding how to handle that, what is our plan if we do end up with a heat stress situation, or we do have an employee who just physically can't wear that face covering because of a personal medical condition or something like that. So we want to make sure, again, we're talking to people to understand what are they experiencing, what are their frustration points around the PPE, and anything that we've added in addition to that. All right, and so for return to work, so there's a couple different ways we've talked about handling return to work. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. So first and foremost do we have the ability to host a pre-return to work training? So could we do it through Zoom meeting like we're doing right now, or Skype, or what is our available technology to be able to do this? Can we bring employees onto these sessions? Do they have the ability to do that from home? Some will and some won't. And so how do we manage that has been a big question for us. And then, of course, if you do have employees on furlough, what are the legal ramifications? How do you handle pay and things like that? Excuse me, if you're asking people to join a pre-return to work training. And so one of the things that, I'm sorry, can you go back to the, so one of the things that we have been talking about with our coordinators and with our crisis management teams is how to initiate that. Or if we can't do that, and in many cases we can't, do we host that first day training and really set this up just as if we were doing a kind of a normal orientation for people if they were joining our business from the beginning. Again, just so we can have that local touch, have that communication point with our folks, as well as remind them, safety is, your safety and health is something that is important to McLean Fogg. We are still focused on Mission Zero. And all of these processes that are new to us and new to our employees are because of that reason. We want to make sure that we, don't end up with coronavirus transmission within our facility. All right, so and what's within some of that training? So of course we talk heavily about this playbook and our response. We go through the signs and symptoms. So again, that people have that education. What that daily self-screening method can be, what are some resources. For example, the CDC has a little app on their website now that you can do self-screening. and get some additional information depending on how you answer those questions. What are our isolation protocols? You know, even if an employee doesn't experience becoming isolated, it's still, you know, really nice for them to know that we have a process in place. And hopefully that puts them at ease, saying, okay, you know, my company, my leadership, they understand what they're going to do. They have a plan for what happens if somebody does become sick at work. That can do wonders for morale and wonders for putting people at ease in this situation. The social distancing measures, what it looks like. You saw in one of the pictures we shared, you know, our cafeteria, our break spaces, we have limited the number of chairs. We have put down, you know, different cleaning chemicals, made those available at every single table so individuals can wipe things down. We have marked physically the floors. We've done all kinds of things to help people understand what social distancing means and looks like. PPE that we talked about, personal hygiene. So still one of the most important things through this process is continuing to wash your hands. And of course, don't touch your face and your eyes, your mouth, things like that, which I will tell you becomes very, very difficult when you are wearing a face mask. So helping people, again, understanding the importance of that and just reminding them constantly not to touch their face and to wash their hands will be helpful. And then, of course, those disinfection measures. So we cover all of those things, you know, generally, as well as in some cases very specifically, depending on, you know, the practical application at the site level. All right, so that concludes our presentation today. And I just wanted to say thank you so much again, Seth, and for the entire Buffalo Niagara partnership for giving us this opportunity to share. I hope that it's been helpful, and we'll open it up for questions, I think.
Abby, thank you so much for that presentation. We do have a couple of questions that, unsurprisingly, are about temperature screening. We had one
Sure.
question before we get into that. How often does your crisis management team meet?
So it varies. So we started out meeting almost every day for the short term when we were first getting started. Both, and one thing I think to point out too is both from a corporate standpoint, we have a crisis management team as well as at the site level. So it does vary between corporate and the site, but almost every day. We have since shifted that to as needed, but also at the same time, which involves most of our crisis management team people, as well as really all the leadership across our company. We are meeting twice a week with our CEO and just going through updates, communications, changes, best practices, you name it.
You talked about isolation protocol. Did that require revisions or changes to human resource policy?
I would say from an isolation standpoint, no, not really. What I think basically when this event became a pandemic, officially, formally called a pandemic, there were some, of course, ADA considerations that were relaxed, which allowed us to ask some of the personal health questions that in you know, previously we weren't able to. But from an overall standpoint, no, we still maintain HIPAA privacy and things like that, even though we're able to ask a few additional questions.
Thank you. And one question before we get into the testing, have you had to change your shop floor layouts to accommodate for social distancing?
Yes, we have. In some cases, it is not possible to physically move equipment around, which I'm sure many of us are experiencing. But one of the things that we have been able to do is put up plexiglass screens. I've even seen some locations use like shower curtains, just so where we do have operators who are working within that 6-foot social distancing, we do still have a bit of a barrier between them. And it hasn't been something that we have fully implemented, but if you think about both the manufacturing areas as well as office areas, we have a lot of cubicle farms, which I'm sure many people do in the open office settings today. We're looking at those Lexan or plexiglass dividers for both sitting working stations as well as standing working stations in the office setting too.
Right. We'll get into the temperature section now. So
Sure.
You mentioned the employee log. Are you just logging that you conducted the testing, or are you logging actual individual temperatures?
Yeah, great question. So we are not actually logging any actual temperatures or symptoms. The only thing that we are putting on our screening form to help, continue to maintain HIPAA privacy is we're putting the employee number, so that specific ID for the employee, and if they were sent home, basically yes or no. That's it. So beyond that, that record goes to our human resources department so that they can do that phone call and that care call to follow up and talk through any details.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So if an employee does come in, gets screening, and has to be sent home for a high temp, as far as compensation, are they given credit for the time of testing? Are they sent home half day? What's your approach to that end of it?
Yeah, so I wish I had my human resources manager available. I believe we are extending the pay through that waiting time, though I think state to state it may be a little bit different, what we can do and what we can't do. But if we do send someone home, we did allow for a 14-day quarantine time that they would receive pay.
So ideally, the screening would happen would prevent someone from coming into the facility. If someone's symptomatic or a confirmed case once they're in the workplace, have you had to deal with managing contact tracing?
We have, yes. I wouldn't say we're doing it well. I would say we are doing it pretty well. So far at McLean Fogg, again, of our 3,500 individuals, we've only had 10 people who have tested positive for coronavirus, and none of which have been because of transmission within the workplace. So we've seen a lot of success in our ability to be able to identify who those individuals have come into contact with. And of course, gain that understanding that, they're coming in because they were exposed external to the workforce. And so how we've handled that is just a whole lot of conversations and people coordinating at the site level to know, what are the chances and where have those individuals been. So thankfully, for the individuals that, have been through this process, they've been very forthcoming, very open about what's been going on. I don't know that, everyone would feel that way, but so far we've had a lot of luck just asking those questions and being diligent.
Thank you. Continuing on in that thought process, is the 14-day quarantine that you mentioned for only for symptoms that are seen within the workplace, assuming a positive COVID screening, or would it also extend to if there's someone in the employee's household that is symptomatic or testing positive?
Yeah, all of those things, all of the above. We've even, in some cases, of course, made, taken into account people who have personal health conditions that may put them at risk too, to make sure that they do have the ability to work from home where that's possible.
Okay, thank you. So a hot topic has been the in-car testing. So the pictures were very helpful of the actual standing queue that you have there. How do you give proper space, or is there just an area of the parking lot that people can then just queue in their cars, or how much time has that been taking as people are coming in for shift work?
Yeah, I would say for our facilities who are managing it from a vehicle standpoint, they've done a couple of things. If someone has done their self-screening, who feels that maybe I have symptoms, maybe I'm not really sure, or I have a question that I think maybe puts me at risk. In some cases, we've developed just parking spots where they can pull into, with signage that says, call this number. So they're getting either the nurse or whoever that individual might be that's coordinating screening, so they can ask those questions and then be screened in their vehicle. So we've eliminated some of the time and the wait time, if you will, by managing it that way. And then for anyone else who, doesn't have those concerns and feels, I'm going to pass this screening, I don't have a fever today, we can streamline them through kind of our normal process.
Right. You talked about a protocol for contractors and visitors coming in. Do you have any disinfection protocol or steps for materials or supplies that are coming in facility?
Great question. We do have a small section in our protocol for like items that are shipped. So how to disinfect boxes and other materials like that.
Okay. So we're all on a Zoom call right now. Are you conducting most of your meetings still via remote and technology, or are you starting to phase in shift meetings or actual meetings within facility?
We are, again, a lot of our workforce where it is possible, obviously myself included, I am working from home. But for our manufacturing locations, sometimes our leadership, they are in the office 50% of the time, and then the other half of leadership is in the office the other 50% of the time, as an example. Same for like engineering resources or quality resources. We are really staggering their shifts. So that they can half the time work from home and half the time work from the facility. So a lot of our meetings, because of that, we use Skype, but basically Zoom, very similar process. So we use a lot of those resources for that. But in the facility where we have operators coming in, we are still doing some meetings. Some of which we're handing out flyers versus meeting physically. In some cases, we do have enough space to pull, 10 or 20 people together, still maintain that social distancing, and, do a big kind of PowerPoint presentation on an overhead, if you will. But it really varies. I would say for small group meetings where, maybe we had 10 or 15 people in a conference room previously, we're dropping that back to 50% or less, depending on the space, again, just so we can maintain that social distancing.
Thank you. So this is our last question, and it's a general one, but I think it's something that we're all trying to figure out on the actual floor with the social distancing protocols that everyone is trying to adhere to. Do you have an anticipated reduction of productivity or product flow that you expect?
Yeah.
In your specific case?
I would say yes. I think we have two main issues in regard to that. One is communication. Many of our facilities are loud. And so our typical kind of current state prior to the pandemic was, our communication was yelling at each other, getting as close as possible and yelling at each other's ear to be able to communicate on the shop floor. Reading lips, which if you're wearing a face covering, right, keeps you from being able to have the ability to read lips. And so we're looking into different communication methods to allow for people to be able to speak. One of which, on our power side of the company, they found is really kind of a headset that is a two-way radio, so that when you do need to have people working in that close proximity with that communication, you can both throw the headset on and turn to the right channel and have that conversation without getting so close to each other. And then another thing for us is the transition between, I would say, the transition between spaces. So once you put all these barriers in place, now you've got to either go around the barrier or you've got to figure out a different method to bring materials to operators to, again, communicate. And so we're still working through that process. We don't know what that's going to look like, but I would say it is definitely adding some time to our ability to produce.
One more question, because it just came through and it's a good one.
Sure.
Protocol on employees basically reporting other employees for not adhering to social distancing or wearing PPE.
Yes.
What are you using in that situation?
So far that hasn't come up in conversation. However, I would say, generally in our facilities, again, pre-pandemic, it's always a difficult conversation to have with your employees when they're, reporting others. In some cases, you think about union facilities and things like that, they were not going to report their union brothers and sisters for making a mistake. They may go talk to them, which to me, I think is really the best practice. So depending on your culture, if you've got a culture where it is normal, for people to go up to each other and hold each other accountable, I think that's the best. If not, then I would say, it really does need to be coaching conversations. So one of the things, again, that we've put in place is that kind of audit or process confirmation, where leadership is maybe even more frequently than normal checking PPE, especially because it is a new requirement, and really has a different connotation than it did before. As I'm sure most of you guys have seen, these face coverings are really not PPE for the individual. They're more PPE to protect you, potentially being asymptomatic from exposing somebody else. And so I think, when you have that communication going, that, hey, this is not really for you to protect you, it's to protect, your brother and sister that you're working with, it's to protect, their family, their kids, their grandparents, and whoever they may be exposed to outside of work. Hopefully that, through those conversations, you're able to get really good compliance. But again, if not, that's okay too. Just have those coaching conversations with people.
So McLean Fog has facilities throughout the country, and obviously New York State, we're looking at a regional reopening of the economy and facilities. Are you using local and state reopen dates as your indicator of how long you'll have these processes in place, or are you setting a crisis management plan that you're expecting to happen for the foreseeable future?
We're looking at it from the foreseeable future.
Okay.
Yeah, so we may end up having some facilities that are, continuing this process, being a little bit more strict than the rest of the community. But we feel, we feel good about that.
Well, Abby, I want to thank you so much for all of this expert information and making yourself available, and also to McLean Fog for helping us and being so available to the partnership. And I also want to thank the Manufacturer Council, title sponsor again, Bank on Buffalo, Harris Beach PLLC, National Grid, and our supporting sponsor, Remedy Intelligent Staffing. Everyone on the call, we will make this information available, especially the link to the actual safety playbook. And we'll continue this conversation. And we thank everyone for making time today. Take care.